In the family that I came into, I really truly believe I was here to alchemize and change the generational pain and trauma of my lineage.
Today we're talking to Morgan Zack. Morgan is a coach and a hypnotist, helping people transform their lives. This is her story about how she got to where she is today. How are you, Morgan?
I'm good. I'm good. How are you? Thank you so much for having me.
Morgan is one of our students. She's a hypnotist now and has added it to her coaching. Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah. So I call myself a transformational coach. I know in this industry, this is like, it's hard to put a label on what we do because it's like so irregular and outside of regular society. But I call myself a transformational coach. And what that consists of is people who are going through or want to go through transformations in their life. Like they've hit a wall in their life. They're like, okay, something's not working. I am either in a marriage I know I need to get out of, or I've hit a wall with addiction, or I'm really overweight, or just something in life where they've hit a wall and they know they need to change, but they just have no idea how to make the change. And so I'm really good at helping people understand the root cause to their problem that they've hit a wall in their life, and then through hypnosis and life coaching, we work through the problems that are underneath this wall that they've hit in life.
Nice,
Yeah.
nice. And so I mean, we'll just dive right in, I guess, and then we can talk consciousness and all that fun spiritual stuff if you like.
My story is pretty deep. It's pretty in depth. It's pretty dark. So I grew up in a very toxic household, and probably from the outside looking in, you wouldn't think so. I grew up in Toronto in the beaches. My family was wealthy. We had BMWs. My dad was an entrepreneur. From the outside looking in, we had the perfect family. But as an extremely sensitive soul that I came in here in this body, and in the family that I came into, I really truly believe I was here to alchemize and change the generational pain and trauma of my lineage. My mom was a raging alcoholic growing up. Like I didn't know any different. I'm an only child, and my dad, like I've grown to understand him now, but growing up, he was very much in his feminine energy, didn't really stand for much, and sort of like kind of just hung out while my mom was super toxic. So I grew up like seeing, my dad kind of, he like wasn't a great businessman either. So he was kind of like all over the place, like in his own world. And my mom was just drinking and toxic, and she didn't learn how to ever regulate her emotions or her depression or her feelings. And so I watched, them fight a lot growing up, and then how she dealt with her emotions was to like drink a lot.
Mm.
And this went on and on and on. And as much as I hated her drinking, it ended up being what I learned was that when you're stressed out, you numb your feelings, because I never saw anybody regulate. My dad just, like I said, was floating around, and my mom was heavily drinking. So, and then at the age of 18, my mom got sober, and that really threw me for a loop because I didn't know how to deal with it. And I would say prior to that, like I guess at 14, I started smoking weed and drinking with my friends. And I use MDMA with my friends and go to raves and have fun. And it was really like I'll backtrack around, like 16 was really the time that I was like, wow, this is so much fun. And it alleviated using MDMA and pot really alleviated all of the pain that I had built up from childhood. And so I always say it was like having joy in the palm of my hand. And I can see now, like, of course I would take it. And it was freeing. And that was the tipping point of my life is I've experienced all this pain, all this trauma. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And then I found joy in the palm of my hand, and that took me on another road. So I became an addict very quickly. Like I said, my mom at 18 got sober. That really threw me off because I didn't know how to regulate my emotions or handle life. And I had a nervous breakdown. and I started using cocaine and at 18 and just kept going down this road of using. I think I was in a car accident as well at some point between 18 and 20, and the doctors put me on Percocets, and that was really the trouble part that I got into. Um, Not only did it numb my physical pain, but it numbed all of my emotional pain, and it put me on a new level of euphoria that I had never experienced. And I became a huge opiate user at 19, 20, and this went on until about 27, 26, 27. And in this time span, I think I was using up to 160 milligrams of oxy a day. I was getting it off the street and cocaine. And my mom eventually was like, you can't live here. You can't, I was probably 90 pounds soaking wet. And I ended up living in a motel in Scarborough and with my boyfriend at the time. And the people there, there was conversations of, well, you need to sell your body to live here. Like I had to pay, I didn't have any money. And being in this rough environment around these people and like having the story that I would have to sell my body, like there was pressure. It was like, it was just what people did there. It's just what the women did there. They were smoking crack, they were doing all these things, and they sold their body for drugs. And that luckily scared the absolute crap out of me. I remember I was smoking meth at this time actually, and because cocaine didn't do it for me anymore. And I remember just being so petrified, like, what have I gotten myself into? Like, this is not fun anymore. And I just made the choice from being so scared to flush my drugs down the toilet. I stayed at this motel for another month and just slept and detoxed. And when I did, I called my mom and I told her what had happened. And I went home and I started on my recovery journey. So that, like I said, that was around 26, 27, and that journey was a long time. It probably took me until 30 to really like fully detox. Like it was, step by step by step by step. But I committed to doing it and I got sober. I gave up everything, including alcohol. And but I didn't do this through societal norms. With quotations, I say that. I had gone to psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, NAAA, doctors, like all of the things. My dad had spent so much money on me going to psychologists to explore my addiction, and we never got anywhere, ever. This was like throughout the years of me using when I was younger and then when I was a little bit older. And I was so frustrated because I was now sober and now all of my mental health issues that I had had prior never were dealt with. So they all came back up. So I had worse anxiety, worse depression. I was probably 210 pounds. I didn't have any solutions to cope. So after trial and error of more therapists, I found this energy healer and mentor online on Instagram. I was listening to her speak about life differently. It was like, we're a soul. We are like, these are why things happen. These are our chakras. And I was like, yeah, like that makes sense to me. Finally, something made sense. And she was offering one-to-one mentorship. And I hired her at that time. Because it was at that, I had nothing to lose. I was like, I can't afford this, but I can't afford to live like this. So I hired her. She started doing energy healing. She worked distantly and also helped me understand how to regulate my nervous system. She taught me meditation, EFT tapping. And slowly, as my nervous system calmed down, we worked through more trauma and then regulating my nervous system and more trauma and energy healing. And yeah, that propelled me to when I finally felt like a human, which is something I never felt for my whole life. I was like, I need to share this gift with other people. So it really made me extremely passionate to help other people the way I was helped. I don't necessarily do energy healing, but I fell in love with hypnosis. And it's become my life's mission to help people who maybe cannot find help in the regular systems.
Yeah, it's incredible how so many people that I talk to, and maybe it's just my group, but we all seem to find our way back through soul, through spiritual
Yeah.
ways,
Mhm.
So I find it fascinating how wherever you are on a path in life, and when we're in those dark night of the soul type places, there is that glimmer of light. And that YouTube, or not that YouTube, that Instagram person on Instagram, that healer, you know, it just seems like they were just right there in your vision, right at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, her journey was similar. And so she had her own addiction story and worked for Disney and was like, and just something was wrong. She couldn't continue on her path either the way it was going. It was dark in its own way. And so she broke out of quote unquote the matrix and went on her own healing journey. And through that, decided that she should help others heal. And it's just like such a domino ripple effect,
Yeah.
yeah, like forever, there was always this like glimmer of light inside of me that just was saying, like, we're gonna get through this. Like, there were so many days I was, before we got on here, I was thinking, there was one point in my life where I just wanted to feel normal. I didn't want to be medicated on antidepressants and Valium. I didn't want to have to drink alcohol to feel calm. I didn't want to need Percocets. And there was a really like solid, probably 10 years of my life or longer, but minimum 10 years where I was not sober once, like for one day. And
Hmm.
it's like I'm living my dream life that I once desired, and it gave me a little bit of reflection to be like, all the things you do desire now are here. Remember when you were never sober, and like, look at you now.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do
Um,
think that we're all back. We're all like, when we get to soul work, it just like it makes sense.
yeah, it does. And it's expanding, right? We expand into this consciousness that it just feels like even though we've gone through all that, whatever it was, whether it be years or months, it seems like there's a part of us that feels like, wow, if I didn't have that, then maybe I wouldn't have that contrast to be where I am now.
Yeah.
It's kind of like a soul coming into these bodies, these crazy lives, in order to see the contrast between, pure essence of love,
Mhm.
and eternalness, if that's a word. And then we feel into these lives, and when we get back there, we're like, oh yeah, okay, I remember this now. I like this.
I almost find it when you've done the work and then you reach the feeling of joy, which a lot of people never actually feel
Yeah.
naturally. I find it can be more disheartening to go back on the scale of emotions than it would be if you've never felt joy. Because if you've never felt joy, you're probably at like boredom. So to go lower than boredom, it's like less of the pendulum swings not as far. And so I would say this is the only downfall of doing all the work is that like you really get to feel joy, but then when the pendulum swings the other way, you're like, how could this be happening? Like the world is over.
Yeah, you're right. There's a baseline that people are at, and they feel pretty normal going from here to here, but when you get way up here, I mean, then think of where how far you gotta jump off the cliff to get down here, right? So yeah, you're gonna feel it. You're gonna definitely feel it. If you think of that, what's that David Hawkins frequency scale? I'm not sure if you're aware of
Yep.
that. Yeah, so if you think about like getting to maybe a 450 or something, and you used to resonate at maybe a 200, when you feel those 200 vibes, you're gonna really feel it, right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And it's crazy to know that people are just like I could never succeed in my life at a lower baseline. Like I was just like I'm a very extreme person, and so I was like very extreme down, and I thought, how do people live like this? How are people out working, feeling so crappy? It just like something inside of me was like, this is not it. Like this is not like you've got to fix this.
Where are you now in terms of where you were? I see you as a very fit person, a very healthy person. I mean, we all have our moments, right? But where are you now?
Um, I would say that I've hit, I went through something earlier this year that I was working at a 9 to 5. it was more of like 7 to 6. It was like a very large chunk of my life. And I thought, earlier this year, I was like, I am doing really well. I'm making 6 figures, I've got my business going in the background. Life is great. And I've been building this business on the back end for a while, really on my self-worth piece. Like, am I worthy and deserving to be helping other people? And I really had to work on that and work on my own confidence. And I found at the beginning of this year, like, this is going really well. And I'd been praying for my business to take off. And, we always say, like, God, the universe, source, whatever you call it, works in very mysterious ways. And my day job was completely taken from me. I experienced some trauma. And, as much as I thought my world had fallen, I was like, this is actually a gift. This is a gift from the universe to be like, this is your time to shine. We're going to give you, financial stability. Like, you're going to be okay, but like, go do your thing. And so that's been challenging to work through. I've noticed how much my ego was attached to that role. It was like the first time I ever had made money in my life, like 6 figures. Wow, like, that was a big deal for me. So I've been working through letting go of that person and really stepping into the role of being an entrepreneur and owning my power. And I don't think I was prepared. I didn't think that there were bigger shoes to step into in my life. Like, I thought I had already done the work, but this has shown me that I still had a little bit of shadows to clean up. And so things are going really well. Like, they're going really well. And there are some days when I go backwards, but other than that, it's going really well. It's funny, lately I've been doing a lot more thinking about this. I really like to use the word God. So if that's triggering for some, I'm sorry, as soul. So if we look at the word God as just creator, that's really how I see that, is that we are a fraction of the creator, the source. We are source. We are source God consciousness. And we are a little fractal here of being able to express that however we are. So your life will be different than mine, but we're both here as that little speck or stardust or sparkle of the one coming down here to express through a 3D life. So this often gets me because my human cannot fathom the things that go on. But I have to remember, like, it's not, we are God in the body. We are God consciousness in a 3D meat suit expressing and learning. And so they're not all linear like our 3D body and mind thinks. Like, I really see things a lot more quantum, and so I'm like way out there with the quantum. Like, I understand things are sideways and they're not front to back.
Yeah.
That's how I perceive it exactly. That's how I
Yeah.
perceive it. On my bad days, I see things from front to back. On my good days, I see things side to side. Like, everything's happening all at once for a reason. We can pull in the quantum field anytime we want. We just have to believe it's there and, project what we want, our desire, and there we go. But it's being able to stay on that frequency.
I find people beat themselves up when they can't stay there. And I
Yeah.
mean, think about monks. They train their whole life to try to stay there. We got to give ourselves the grace or breaks, you know? But I heard something this morning and I thought of you. I saw this gentleman being interviewed on the Drew Barrymore show. And he said something and I was like, I almost had an out-of-body experience when he said it. And it was something along the lines of, imagine, you haven't been born yet
Mm-hmm.
and you've been given a body to look after,
Okay.
right? And so how are you going to look after that body? And there was almost this distinct separation in my mind, this body that we're in, and just a knowing, a deeper knowing of, oh yeah, it was like, oh yeah, I'm not this body. I'm also somewhat not this mind. I'm so much more than that.
I'm sure you've heard of this. This is a very common book, The Vortex, from Abraham Hicks. So
Oh yeah.
Abraham channels through, what's her name? I'm having
Oh yes.
and she channels Abraham, and I've tried to read the book, The Vortex, many of times, and it is because it's channeled, it's like not easily digestible, at least not for me. And oh God, I've lost my train of thought. Uh, oh, so Abraham says, like, think of your higher self always connected. So it's connected to you like your arm is just connected to you're not like, oh, there's my arm, make sure it's on me today. It's just part of you. And that's how Abraham describes our higher self. Like, it's not like, oh, higher self, please be with me. No, it's just here. It's just here. And you just have to pay attention to it the way you do your hand. You're like, oh, yeah, that's my hand. Like, oh, yeah, we're always in one.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
because we're always like, oh, how can I connect to my higher self?
And it's just there. It's
Yeah.
just have to just move out of the way, like the way you do in hypnosis, like moving your conscious mind. Like we're just gonna put it aside for a moment. It's the same thing. It's just like stop your thinking mind and just connect. Like I always find drop into my heart space. Let me connect to my higher self, and it like can take 2 seconds if
Mm.
you understand what it means to take your consciousness and move it out of the way or your conscious mind.
How do you, this is a good question. I think people would be interested in, because I often think of it, mainly because you mention it. I've heard you mention it a couple times now, is dropping into your heart space. What do you do to do that? How do you go about doing that?
So I think if somebody's never done that before, I would suggest meditating, right? Like, so that's how I started, as I started to meditate and you quiet the mind and you become in the present moment. And when you're in the present moment, you're able to be one with what is happening right now. And so when I'm in the present moment, I'm able to connect to my heart space, and that's what I consider is dropping in. And there are
Yeah.
some days where it's not easy to drop in and be in the present moment, right? Your mind is going a million miles an hour, or if there's stress or
Mhm.
whatever. And there's some days like today, I could just close my eyes and I'd be right there.
Yeah. Are you
Yeah.
focusing on your heart space, like where it is in the body in your field, or what?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess so. I think I've practiced so many times connecting with my heart space. Like you can practice breathing in through your heart and then exhaling out of your heart, like imagining air, like air moving through, or you can imagine energy going clockwise in your heart space, or you could just focus on what does it feel like just to be like right here.
Mhm.
Sometimes when you connect to your heart space, it can feel sad. And that it just means like, oh, there's like something that we haven't looked at, but and like I think that's a good thing is to be able to connect to that sadness if there's something sitting there, you know? It's like an emotional feeling. It's like, oh, there's my emotions.
There's something that's being talked about more, which is good, and it's heart-mind coherence. Have you heard about that?
Yes. I actually have, but I don't, you'll have to like go into it more.
Well, I wish I knew about it more to talk about it in depth, but the basics of it are, basically like you do, connecting your mind, wherever that is, to your heart and sort of having this, in my mind, it sort of looks like a superhighway of, little lights or energy that's working together. So, it's almost like if you were to, there is talk about how if you were to graph it, showing, the ups and downs, the waves, and then the heart has its own graph, and you sort of connect with the heart so much so that those graphs match up,
Wow.
right?
Maybe
And you
that's why
want that match.
I don't realize.
Say that again.
Maybe that's what I'm doing and I don't realize. I find that when you're like if you're trying to picture this in your mind right now, listening to this, if you can drop into your heart space, it's like you're in your body and not in your mind. So yes, you're in your heart, but you're in your senses in a different way. You can tap into the quantum field through your heart because it's like you're in alignment with your soul. Let me try to say this like more logically. It's like your senses, instead of it becoming a logical thing, it's just a body thing.
Yeah.
I don't know if that helps, but it's like you're in your body, but you're not as attached to your body the way you would be
Mhm.
if your mind. When you're in your mind and let's say your ego is controlling what's going on, you're perceiving things so much differently. When you're drop into your heart and drop into your body, it's like time becomes infinite. Everything's possible right here, right now. We're not on this schedule of like, oh, it's like 4 o'clock. I have to do this in the gym. It's like that somehow just goes away. And you're like, I am right here, right now. Like I could do anything. I could create anything. You're in the seat of the creator instead of the ego.
Have you read The Seat of the Soul?
No.
Oh, you should. You should. I can't remember the author's name and I'm not going to hazard a guess, but yeah, really good book. I listened to it a couple times in the car
This,
and read it. The Seat of the Soul.
huh.
Yeah,
Okay.
really good book.
How do you perceive consciousness?
Consciousness, and I was going to ask you after, but we'll, I guess, merge it together. Is I remember it brings me back to way back when I was a teenager, and my a family member of mine had we'll just call him a husband. He's since passed, but he was kind of hard to get along with. Like he was just one of these guys that just pushed your buttons, and everyone they weren't too fond of him. Anyway, he asked me one day when I was a teenager, he's like, where do you think thoughts come from? Where do thoughts come from?
Hmm.
And I was a teenager and I was like, I got all in a huff and stormed off because it was just another one of those things that he was just pushing buttons to me,
Hmm.
right? But now it's almost one of the greatest questions that was ever asked to me in my life. And I think about it almost every day now as a hypnotist. Where do thoughts come from? And, I think I'm not going to go down the road too much. We're more of a woo-woo channel here. I like it that way. But, I have a feeling and sometimes a visual and sometimes just a knowing. It feels like thoughts, consciousness, right? Where is consciousness? What is consciousness? I feel like it's almost outside of us,
Hmm.
right? And I know there's people that talk about this, like the brain's more of an antenna than anything. And I think we're picking up on stuff in our field and we're drawing from that. And I think that's where our connection is. It's where we go after we're done with this body. I feel like it's just right there, When I work with people that have died and come back, there's not like a time period between being in the body and being on the other side. It's one blink and you're there. I think consciousness is in everything.
Hmm.
I think that this coffee cup has consciousness, just on in a different form.
Hmm.
And yeah, I believe consciousness in it is everywhere. Like, in every blade of grass, there's consciousness. Every tree has consciousness.
Well, I think to go with a coffee cup, it's like this was an idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everything is a thought before it comes into reality. Somebody had to think about, or many people had to think about, because I really don't think there ever is an original thought either, right? There are many people thinking the same thing at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like who does something about it. So this coffee cup, in order to be here, had to be designed from consciousness. So yes, of course it has consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
We don't think about that though, because it doesn't have like a living, breathing body, but I don't think that's what consciousness is. This living, breathing body is like its own entity of being a mammal, right? That like, this is just pure consciousness, matter and pure consciousness. We are reptilian consciousness and matter. Like this is just not reptilian. This is not a mammal.
Mm-hmm.
I, I 100% agree. Everything has consciousness.
Yeah.
When you talk to your plants, they grow. Like I do sit here and I tell my plants I love them. I've turned into one of those people.
I think all of us do in our late 30s.
Are
Yeah. Oh
so
my,
beautiful. And it's like,
they
it's
are.
just like, holy crap, this thing is so big. I
Right?
didn't like plants. I do now. It's never my thing.
So where are you at with hypnosis and coaching and where's your mind on the future, or are you just taking it day by day?
I am taking it day by day. Um, I'm going to be uh, working physically in a naturopathic doctor's office on weekends, which is wonderful. I can see clients there for hypnosis and life coaching, and then I work online. Other than that, I feel like I've entered all these dreams that I've had of like, oh, I want to do this, I want to be this. And now I'm here and I'm like, oh my God, now what? So I think I'm waiting for, I always say, I'm waiting for God to show me where I need to go next. Cause like, I don't know. I don't know. It's really just, I think, nurturing what I have created and just nurturing it and loving it for this. This has been 4 years in the creation and it's here now. And I'm like, I don't know what the future holds. And I'm really happy that this stuff is here. And I often catch myself like, what am I going to do now? And like, it's like, but you're living your dream now. Let's just really soak this up for everything that it is. Doing this business and really just enjoying it.
I think it is important to go slow. I think you can see opportunities when you're going slow.
What was that like for you starting over? Because I feel like I'm in the exact same spot, right? Here I am, 36, like really starting over, and it scares me, but it's a gift. And so did you experience fear?
Oh yeah. Oh my God, yeah. I was terrified. So I won't go through my whole story, but basically when I decided to get back into the workforce, I tried to be what I used to be.
Mhm.
And I I interviewed for a job and I got a job in my old world. And I got the job as much as them calling me and saying, you have the job if you want it. And I was so terrified in that moment of falling back into what happened that I lied to them and told them that I had moved on and got another job when I had nothing. I was terrified, terrified. So there was an element of me that had to look back at my past and forgive that past because I took so long to get to where I thought I wanted to be. Like I manifested the crap out of that job that sent me into the ground.
Mhm.
Um, and I thought it was what I wanted. When I got into hypnosis, when I did the training for hypnosis, I was excited. I was ready to go, right? And I was out the gates and went to Cuba. And while we were in the Cuba airport coming back, they had the TV screens on and saying that they were shutting down the world, right? For COVID. So we got back from Cuba and basically everything shut down. So now nobody's doing anything. And I felt like a horse behind, like a racehorse that was trapped behind the gate, right? It was like running, but the gate was there. To your question about fear, when we opened the place here with the center here, I remember waking up it like even before I put everything in here, I think. I remember waking up at night at like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., 4 a.m., so anxious about money and what's going to happen and all this stuff. And there was a moment, there had to be a few moments, obviously, but I remembered moments where I just had to give it over to God,
Yep.
right? Just to give it over. And that alleviated a lot. And Les, Les, for viewers, Les is my husband. And Les said, one day he was like, "Are you going to give up?" And I was like, "Well, no." And he's like, "Well, how can you fail if you don't give up?"
My
I was like,
mentor
"Oh, shit." What?
my mentor says to me literally all the time. She's like, you literally cannot fail if you don't give up, period.
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, fine. But it's not going like this. And she's like, but doesn't matter. In our mind, I'm like, well, we're thinking like, where are all the clients? And I really truly think this is where I really and I believe this so wholeheartedly, except when I'm on the other end of it. We are given what we can handle. We are given a match for what we are. And we're not going to be given an influx of all these people if we can't hold it. It doesn't mean we won't be able to hold it, but we're given what we can hold right now. And so, like that's wonderful when you're making like all this money. You're like, oh, look what I can hold. But when you're on the other end of it, you're like, well, what's wrong with me? And
Yeah.
I don't think there's really anything wrong. It's just frequency. It's like, well, where is your energy at? Like, Are you holding a lot of fear? Are you holding a lot of judgment on yourself? Because like that frequency just matches itself. And so it's remembering to just be like, okay, fine, I give in. And when you give in and when you surrender is when it works out because you're no longer holding fear and holding judgment and panic and worry. And that's when God consciousness can move with you and for you.
It's almost like if I have a visual about it, because that's how my mind works, it's just constant visuals. But like, it's almost like when we're in that fear state,
Mhm.
our aura, that 1.5 meter around us, it's like it crystallizes.
Yeah.
It gets hard. And then universe energy can't move through it and with it. It bounces off of it.
Yep.
Right? So really focusing on, I know it can be very hard sometimes to release fear. And even I get, I can't say I'm a guru over here. But yeah, I found the easiest way to release fear is to give it over. Try giving it over to the universe, to God, to source. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it's accepting that, like really accepting for me, like I don't know the answer and I'm going to drive myself into a wall trying to figure it out. So just give it over and allow whatever is meant to happen. Like it's learning internal safety, knowing that money does not make us safe. And I know that's such a backward concept, but it's like money is a system,
Mm-hmm.
right? And yes, we are indoctrinated into it, but remembering like we are a soul and we have to create internal safety as a human first as much as we can. Like I am provided for. I live on this earth. This earth has everything I need to live, except we're indoctrinated to think differently. And so that's where this panic sets in, but that's all systems put in place for control. So it's like being able to detach, but it's so much easier said than done. I practice daily. This is actually what my podcast is on tomorrow. I practice daily of like trying to get out of the matrix, but you're not ever going to be out of it unless you go live in in the middle of the woods by yourself and grow your own food and never talk to anybody. So it's like learning how to coast with the systems and not be pulled out and be able to utilize them for fun. Like, look at all the money I can make, or look what I can experience as we go along. We don't realize how things hit us always. Um, the only reason have dug into this trauma so deeply is I was forced to.
Mm-hmm.
My mental health was like, you have no choice. It sent me down a major depression. I didn't, it's like I wasn't able to ignore it. And that it is a gift in that sense. But also it's really hard. Like these things that happen to us, yes, the brunt of it happens when we're in childhood. And of course, this, you taught me this, like whatever we learn in our childhood, we just continue to replay. And my relationship, the relationship that I had with my old work was literally a spitting image of my relationship with my mother. And being able to see that, I'm like, oh my God, we're doing this again. Like I have gone through all the trauma healing I thought, and it's like, oh no, there's some more karma to clear up.
Right? It never ends. But I feel like it gets lighter. It gets lighter. I think, Les and I were chatting yesterday, and we were looking at that David Hawkins scale. And he's like, "Where do you feel like you are right now?" And I said, "Oh, I think I'm down where courage is, and it's like 250 or 200 or something." He's like, "I don't think so. I think you're higher than that." He's like, "Yes, I see you at this number." And I said, "Well, I guess, I'm having courage with my work right now and trying new things. So I think I just stuck myself there." But you do get it to a point, and it takes a little while, but you do get to a point where you're not as reactive, right? So stuff is happening around you, and you're just sort of like, oh, the bubble, and it's not bad. I have people in my life that tell me, oh, you just live in a bubble with unicorns and you know. And I'm like, well, I like that. I like my bubble. Thank you very much. But I feel like I see the world differently through that lens of the bubble, you know?
I think there's like spiritual bypassing with like I'm gonna ignore everything, and I don't think you've done that. Like when you've done the work, then you're like, I am choosing just to not participate.
Yeah.
There's one thing of like, I'm just going to ignore this and everything is love and light. Or there is alchemy and choosing to put boundaries up to keep yourself like, I have done that. I don't want anything to do with it. And yes, I'm staying in my bubble
Yeah.
because where I don't have to deal with drama and trauma. And you know what?
Yeah.
Drama and trauma are just, it's normal in a lot of society. Stress and like pain and numbing, like it's just part of society and it's backwards. It
Yeah.
really, I often think like when I see people drinking and there's no judgment around this, it's just from where I sit because I've gone down such a dark hole with addiction. I can see that like having a drink to celebrate, it goes so much deeper than that. It's like, why are we poisoning ourselves to celebrate? It's like, where the heck did that idea come from? And like, I could go down a
Mhm.
whole rabbit hole of that, but it's just, yeah, I think being in the unicorn bubble is nice. And you find other people who are in that and understand. And it's like, oh, I can hang out here all day with these people because they understand you.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's about choosing to see love in the world instead of fear, right?
Oh,
I could go down the fear hole easily. I remember um, back in 2020, when the world was at crisis mode. And I remember getting up in the morning. I would get up early and I would grab my coffee and I would go sit on the couch and open my computer, and the house was quiet still, and I would go on to, I'd had three in a row: CBC, BBC, CNN, just reading all the stuff. And I'd be sitting there with my coffee. I'm like, oh my God, this coffee's really making my chest tight and like anxious.
yeah.
And I realized and as soon as I recognized that, because I was every day choosing fear, and I didn't even know what I was doing. Right? I didn't even know, or it wasn't even thought. So as soon as I recognized that, I stopped watching the news, and it's been much, much better since.
So I've been digging into heavy metal detox. I've been getting now I'm in like now I've reached this. I'm like, okay, no deodorant, like no aluminum deodorant. I've changed my toothpaste. I'm taking like a resin in the morning that's made of all these minerals and it's going down this rabbit hole. You understand like there is just so many unhealthy things that are normal. Like we're not supposed to be sick. We're supposed to be here enjoying our life, living off of the earth. And we've just moved so far out of that. People don't get sunlight. We are not grounding with nature. There's just so many things that people have moved so far out of it, and we're told that that's normal. We're told cancer is normal. These things are not normal to who we like to the human race. There's just so much that's fake and fictional and man-made that our bodies are just reacting to it. We are made of energy. Like we are. I know we're made to think we're not, and it's like a remembering. That's what we're here
Mhm.
to do is to remember that we are. I truly believe this. And when we remember that we are, something like that makes complete sense, right? Wearing a crystal makes complete sense. Like these things, because it's all energy, that makes sense. So clearing out negativity and karma makes sense because if you clear that out, then your energetic field is clear and you become a magnet. You just do. I've experienced it. It's absolutely wild when you're just so like the way you're feeling good, you're feeling joy, you become a magnet for things to work. You can just think about it and it will just manifest in maybe not the direct way you think, but it will.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today, and just explaining your story, because I think oftentimes we see people at where they are now,
Yeah.
and it's hard to see where they were, and oftentimes we get caught up and we idolize where
Yeah.
they are now, and
Yeah.
it's nice to know that everyone's on their path forward and
Yeah.
and can get there.
I believe that. And I get caught in that too. I'll idolize like where somebody else is compared to where I am. And it's like if we just like let go of comparison and just stick with like our own path,
Yeah,
our growth is for ourselves. It's not to compare to somebody else.
exactly. Exactly. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank